Later, one of my, as he said, squirrely little friends started telling people that I had beaten up this, who at this point, the guy looked like he was about 21. And so he came and found me in the bathroom one day and picked me up off by my forearms up against the wall and reminded me that there was definitely a difference in the balance of power and strength. He spared me though, and I didn't get wailed on. I just said, "I'll take care of my friends. We're done." And he said, "All right." And then he kind of gently set me down on the ground. So that was not a good thing. So we look for these three characteristics. The question there a little bit is the behavior repeated over time. Um, if an intimidation act is occurring, it's still an intimidation act, even if it occurs just a single time period. It may not meet the definition of bullying, but we're still talking about it as an act of intimidation. When we think about bullying, we look at these various types of bullying. There's, of course, verbal bullying, the taunting that goes on. The social isolation, that's probably one of the more frequently that I see in my practice. Girls are really pretty vicious at this one. They'll ostracize one girl for whatever reason, and tell all their other friends, do not sit with her, do not talk with her, do not sit on the bus with her, do not sit at her lunch table. Wow, that's much more powerful than somebody coming up and pushing you or book checking you, because it really can have a significant impact. Physical bullying, more common among boys, but there is a surprising prevalence of physical bullying with females as well. Rumors, and these have become more vicious in today's technology age. I mean, when I was a kid, I'm 46, and so when I was a kid, if you wanted to start a rumor about somebody or someone was trying to start a rumor about you, it took a long time to get up off the ground. I mean, people almost had to go out and write out papers and hand them out to make this rumor. Nowadays, as you're aware with the technology, a millisecond can destroy a person's social existence for a significant period of time. And the rumors are part of the cyberbully. Property taken, and this has also increased a lot. When we were kids, we didn't have a lot of stuff to bring to school. Maybe if somebody was taking your property when they're bullying you, it was in your neighborhood and they were taking your basketball home or something like that. But nowadays, with all the kids bringing their MP3 players and their music technology and cell phones and things like that to school, there's a lot of technology stealing that takes place. Forced to behave badly. This is still a definition of bullying. Frequently, I'll see a young person that's really trying to fit in. And in order to fit in, they agree to do things that are pretty negative to themselves that they wouldn't do. I even see this on college campuses. A lot of the binge drinking and some of the stuff that goes on with hazing is a form of bullying and definitely can have some impact. And then there's cyberbullying and racial bullying as well. So when we think of bullying, it's not just the kid that comes up and books checks somebody or won't let them go into the bathroom. There's a whole host of areas where it can take place. If we look a little bit at the frequency, 77% of secondary students report being bullied within that calendar school year. 77%. I was stunned at that number. It's a pretty liberal definition, I would guess, in terms of bullying, but and I would hope they weren't just including their friends teasing them or picking on them occasionally as bullying, but that's a pretty robust number. 15% report of having 1 to 3 episodes in the past month. 3.4% have experienced more than 3 episodes, and 50% report that their episodes when they were bullying, they didn't report to anybody. So they kept it to themselves and there was no intervention by school personnel. I think typically when we think about bullying, the poster child of the bully, we're probably thinking a lot more about that 3.4%. The kid that gets bullied in the lunchroom, gets bullied on the playground, gets bullied before school, gets bullied on his way home or on the bus. Those are more, and I think those kids definitely we need to set up intervention programs for, and we need to help those kids out. We need to make them feel safe. We need to provide them skills to deal with this. But I also think we need to look at not just that 3.4%, because as we'll see here in a few minutes, the impact of bullying, you don't have to be the most bullied child. 3.4%, so you're talking about 4 out of 100 would be that bottom group of kids that get bullied, or top group if you look at it, that bully more often. So I think we need to look not just at that smaller group, but think more broader. 30% of 6th to 10th graders report being involved in a moderate or frequent bullying. Now, that's an interesting statistic because it involved. It means that they could either be the bully or they could be the one that is being bullied. But 30%, 1 in 3. 1 in 5 kids reported to be a bully or to do some bullying. This statistic amazed me. I don't. It's hard to put in context because there's a lot of kids in the U.S., but 160,000 kids miss school each day due to bullying. What are we doing because the flu here? Everybody's wearing masks. Everybody's going, they're getting shots. They're taking care of all these things. They're saying, don't come to appointments if you've got symptoms of the flu. We only hear about bullying when it results in somebody shooting up a school or somebody being beat up in a park or being killed. That's when we hear about it. We don't just hear about the flu when somebody dies about it. And we do a lot of preventative stuff out there to try to take care of the flu. Parents are doing preventative stuff. Little kids are doing preventative stuff. Physicians' offices are doing preventative stuff. How much effort and time do we put in to prevent bullying? I mean, yes, the flu is serious, and we don't like to miss work, or we don't like to get sick, and some of us have even worse reactions to it. But some of the scars that can be caused by bullying can be pretty significant if you look at the ripple effect. We think about flu, oh, we don't want to pass flu on. Well, what happens to kids that are bullied that don't get help? Well, the ripple effect starts to occur. They maybe go bully other kids, or they start to feel bad about themselves, and they make other choices that cause more problems, maybe substance abuse, maybe poor education achievement. It's not just, if you get the flu, and hopefully it's a brief course of it, you miss 2 or 3 days of school, you make up your homework, and you're all good. It's kind of hard to get over the effects of bullying, yet we're willing to put a lot more effort into managing one versus the other. Every 7 minutes, a child is bullied in the U.S. I was surprised by this. I thought it was much higher, but what they were talking about here was definition of in a playground, and it was considered noticeable bullying. This was more important to me, and the reason I put that statistic up there, I don't sure by the 7 minutes, but only 11% of these episodes in studies are resolved by staff members. That means 89% go unnoticed or unaddressed. 4% are resolved by peers. That means there's almost a 1 in 3 likelihood that a peer is going to solve a bullying as a faculty member on the playground. That's a lot to ask of your peers. But more importantly, 85% go unresolved or undealt with. And if you think about that repetitive coercive action, it's a pretty high number, and definitely something we need to pay attention to. Why do students bully? A lot of the kids that bully have been bullied before, or they're being neglected or abused or manipulated at home. And they learn this behavior from a need to achieve some power because they feel powerless in other areas. Some of the kids that bully feel powerless in their ability to achieve educationally. So school's not a place where they're getting warm fuzzies. But if they feel that they can control other kids in their class, maybe the kid that's getting the straight A's, well, then I got power over that kid. He may be smarter than me, but I'm making him walk home a different way from school. Who's really the smarter one here? Who's taking care of it? So there is typically in most bullies, and I'm not talking just the somebody that's with their friends and somebody's being bullied and they kind of participate just a little bit. I'm talking about more of your movie stereotypical bullies. There really is a need for power. And if you talk to bullies, and I don't want to stereotype these boys or girls as bad kids. I'm talking about the way they think. When I was talking to a young man who had a chronic history of bullying, bad stuff, and I asked him, I said, well, do you ever feel bad for the people you bully? He's like, what do you mean? And I said, well, okay, let's talk about the last kid that you beat up. And this was an assault charge. And he beat the kid up, and he's a 6th grader, took $20, which the kid had to pay for his lunch ticket for the next month or whatever. It's $40 that he had. Why the parents sent cash, I don't know, and this should have been much better to check, but they did. And this kid literally, when he came to school, the kid that was the victim, his shirt was torn, He had a black eye that was swollen shut. His wallet was gone, and his underwear was torn. He'd been given like wedgies, extensive wedgies. And I asked him, I said, "Did you feel bad for him?" He said, "No." I said, "Well, I tried not to react." I said, "Well, that's interesting." I said, "How come?" He said, "I did him a favor." I said, "Well, how'd you do him a favor?" Trying to control my sort of disgust. And he said, "Well, that kid's got to learn something now. He can't go showing off his $40. He can't be walking down a place without one of his friends. I taught him to take care of himself. He's better off because he met me." Wow. And so when we've got the stereotypical extreme bullying, that sort of thinking is pretty hard to reverse, but we really need to do that because, boy, if you think that way, if you're a kid and you think harming a victim is to their benefit, we want to get in and intervene on that pretty quickly because it's bad enough when it's a sixth grader, but we don't want this going on in higher levels. And people, you're zealot, you're overreacting. And I'm not talking, if somebody gets book checked and their books fall on the floor, I don't like it, but I'm not going to put the kid in the principal's office for book checking somebody. But when we get these kids that do these significant acts and they think this way, it's not, oh, he'll grow out of it. Oh, it's just a phase. Oh, they have a tough home life. Fine, even if they have a great home life, if they're thinking this way, that's a type of bully thinking that ends up in big term problems. And students often that do bully can be rewarded. If they're the bigger, tougher, stronger type kids, not only they get the power, but they also, they get to control people. They know that so-and-so walks home a different way because they threatened to beat them up. They know so-and-so changes in the gym teacher's office because they're afraid they're going to get locker slammed. Pretty powerful to be able to control other people. A bully who doesn't control a reaction. Take a subtle example here. When I was early on in my training, we did some playground interventions, and we had this one little guy that was he was getting picked on, not harmfully, but it was effective enough that he was really not wanting to go out on the playground. And all that was happening was the bully was taking his hat. Now, what would the kid do that once the bully took his hat? He'd chase him, yeah. And when he chased him and it didn't work, what would he do? He'd cry, and he'd sit down and he'd cry, and then he'd go tell the teacher. And of course, the teacher would go get his hat back, talk to the kid that was the bully, call the teacher, call the parents, but this was continuing to go on. And so I sat down with the young man. I said, "I know this is going to be hard for you, but I want you to wear a hat to school tomorrow that you don't care about." He was rolling to sports teams, and I said, "Just one that you don't care at all about. In fact, a hat of the team that you hate the most. Wear that hat. And when Jimmy comes over and takes it, I want you to just go, 'Oh, you like that team too?' And I want you to just walk away. I know it's going to be hard to do, but you don't care about the hat. Trust me on this. Do this." So he did it. And Jimmy went back into the classroom, and all of a sudden Jimmy didn't have anything to brag about. Because every other day when Jimmy would go in the classroom, he'd say, "Oh, I took Myron's hat. It was great. He ran around and he cried, and then he went to the principal and the teacher's office, and it was so funny. You should have seen him out there." Well, now Jimmy's sitting there with his hat, and he's looking around the classroom, and there's no story to tell. And I know that's a very simple example, but if we can start out with teaching kids some of these skills early on and not allow the bullies to achieve power, that's how we're gonna cut back on these concerns. And this is why we need to cut back. If we look at kids that have been victims of bullying, there's a higher incidence of depression. There's a higher incidence of low self-esteem. There's an increase of health problems, headaches, stomach aches, back aches, gastrointestinal struggles, diarrhea, difficulty breathing. Anxiety increases, poor grades, and in some cases, extreme cases, think Colorado, homicidal or suicidal thinking due to the bullying situation. Now, we're not thinking this when we're dealing with our elementary kids, but when you see the kids that go to the extreme that those two kids did in Colorado, it was not something that just started bullying the day before they took that act. It had been going on for a very, very long time. And it got to the point where that was the decision they made. I choose not to mention their names because I don't like to glorify situations like that. But I do think that when we need to look at, we don't need to think of every bullying episode as going to the extreme end. But boy, if we can prevent one of those going to the extreme end, it makes our lives a lot better. And so these are the impacts on the victims. The impacts on bullies. Bullies do get in fights. They do get hurt. You know, the guy that bullied me, he was a lot bigger and stronger, but he had to go a couple of weeks with a black eye, and he wasn't allowed to play in the kickball game, but neither was I. There's a higher incidence of stealing and vandalism among bullies because why? That sense of entitlement. That same young man that said, I taught a lesson, and this is an example from quite a ways back, so I feel safe using it, and it was in a different state, so we're good. But this was right around the advent of email and institutional email. And this kid was really smart. Well, he figured out what what one of the administrators' password was on their computer. And he sent out a message that was very derogatory. And when asked, he confessed. He said, well, the teacher was foolish enough to use his last name as the password. I did him a favor. Yeah. I guess he won't be using his last name on his bank account password, I hope. But it's that sort of thinking that it's not just to the other kids that we want to try to dissuade that. And we do see more risk-taking behaviors among bullies. They feel they have less to lose, and grades can be poor. And they can have a negative attitude towards school and towards school staff. And one of the things we know about attitude towards school, if we take it away from the bullies and we look at depression and anxiety, getting kids involved in school and having a positive attitude or a positive experience with school is probably one of the best remedies we could come up with to addressing depression and anxiety. How often does the bully feel wanted in school? Not very often. I mean, the only thing I can think of where if you look at, I don't know how old you guys are, but the Bad News Bears, do you remember that movie that was done a number of, well, the kind of the local thug that was the bully, Kelly Leak, I think was his name in the movie. When he got to play on the baseball team and joined a group of people and got some connection, wow, and he got notoriety, all of a sudden the negative bullying behavior wasn't necessary because he was getting it the right way. And so we don't just need to look at bullies and say, bully bad, here, let's rescue the person that's being bullied. We need to say, okay, yeah, you're not making good choices. Let's figure out a way to help you out in your life so you don't feel the need to make these choices and not just push these kids out, because they will come back to bully again. This is a circle of bullying, and I'll go through it really quickly because it's kind of there's a whole paper written about it, but H is the victim. And if you think of a circle of bullying as it happens, and this could be cyberbullying or this could be on the playground bullying, if it's just the first bully, A, that bugs H, that's one thing, and it still is unpleasant for H to experience the bullying, but that's not usually what happens. Usually there's B there, and B is kind of like, well, they're bullying him. I don't want to look uncool, and I don't want them to bully me, so I'm just going to bully a little bit. And then C's like, well, yeah, it's not really that big a deal because they're doing it. And so they get into this group think. One of the reasons adolescents, we don't like them to drive in the car with more than one friend. They become stupid. It's because start dividing their IQ and their problem solving by the number of kids in their car. Well, same thing with the bullying. There's this sort of group mentality. You think of that young man that was beaten to death. Yeah, they say there was one or two kids that did a lot of the blows in the fight. But it was a group mob mentality that went in. And had one kid done this bullying, I can't guarantee it, but I'm betting if there's only one person there, that kid wouldn't end up dead. But it was the group thinking. And then what happens is a lot of times it just goes to A, B, C, D, and you got this bullying episode, and unfortunately there's no E, Fs, or Gs there. The E is the one that's kind of looking around going, gosh, this is uncomfortable. Should I go get somebody? Should I say something? Should I do something? And then the F's the one that's going, okay, well, I'm going to go get somebody to stop this because this isn't really cool. And the G is the guy that steps in the middle and says, hey, leave this guy alone. Go pick on somebody else. He doesn't need you anymore. Unfortunately, we don't have enough G's. But we need to start looking for a lot of G's and have those kids, give them the skills to do that without making them feel like they're going to get in a situation of them being a victim then. Teach children how to handle the bystander role. We want to turn those kids that are the bystanders, those E's, the ones that are sitting there knowing that this is uncomfortable and this isn't cool that this is happening. We want to give them some skills, and basically the way we give them the skills is through awareness. And so our kids give us opportunities. They'll come up and say, hey, I was at school and boy, they were really picking on Jimmy today. Really? Well, let's take time to talk about that. Not just, oh, poor Jimmy, or oh, did you tell your teacher? Take time. Wow. Have you ever been with another friend that was bullied? Well, yeah. How do you think that friend felt? How did that impact him? How'd you feel when you were sitting there watching him bully? How did your friend respond? What could they have done differently, or what do you think you could have done differently? What do you want to do the next time? I think we need to have these conversations with our kids. In adolescence, they're going to have this situation where they're going to be at a party and somebody's being talked into drinking and they don't want to drink. We need to teach our kids the stability and rehearse the ability to say no and to handle these peer pressure situations. And we can start with the bystander role. It's a lot easier. You're not saying, what would you do if you were being bullied? You're kind of saying, okay, you're there. You're not the bully. You're not the victim, but you're uncomfortable when you're there. And it's good that you feel uncomfortable because it's not right for kids to be bullied. But let's help you try to understand what you could do through your friend's eyes to not go into the bully road or to not be the victim. So when we're thinking about prevention programs, we'll get to this in a couple seconds, not only do we need to give bullies things to do to stop bullying, but we need to help victims not be victims. And we can't just do it one way or another, because if we're not going to help the kids that get prone more to being the victim role, there's always going to be people out there that are going to say, well, I'm going to go ahead and bully. And we need to attack both lines for an intervention. Characteristics of bullies, and these are somewhat stereotypical, but I look at these as, I don't look at these as diagnostic criteria. I look at them as warning flags. If I've got a kid that's got a lot of these characteristics, I'm going to kind of watch their behavior on the playground. I'm going to watch their behavior in the locker room. Not because I want to label them or pick them out, because if they are going in the direction of being a bully, I want to help them. Because it's not fun to be a bully. A bully's not, if you have to get attention and power and control by being a bully, it's not a good choice. So I'm not picking on these kids. I'm just kind of saying, wow, I don't want them to have to go this direction in order to feel involved. So these kids often have witnessed or experienced bullying at home. They're impulsive and they're easily angered. Boys tend to be more physically strong, but you all know some of the bullies that we grew up with were kind of the little wiry guys that they were willing to cross boundaries and risk take to a level that the other people wouldn't, so that it kind of came into a bullying situation. And these kids do feel a strong need to dominate or coerce or control others. And as I indicated earlier, some of these kids have a great deal of difficulty showing empathy. A number of years ago, I was working with a young man that it was interesting. There was two brothers, and they said I could share this story just because it was real illustrative. They got a BB gun for Christmas. No, it was their birthdays, because it was still it was in the fall, and they had starlings in their yard, and so they both were out shooting birds, and they had it pumped up pretty high, so they were pretty successful with the mortality rate on these birds. And the one kid, the mom walked in, and one of the brothers, and he was just in tears in his room that night. And she walked in and said, what are you upset about? Because the parents didn't know, which is, I don't know why they were letting him out there with BB guns on their first time on, but that's a different story and another parenting talk. We won't go there. But the one little guy was just in tears. And he said, Mommy, those birds didn't do anything to me. And it was so much fun. We didn't really think we could shoot them, but once we started shooting them and they started falling, it was just, I feel horrible. Can I go back and make them go back to life? What can I do? And his brother walked by in the conversation and said, quit being a weenie. They're just birds. They crap on our picnic table. They're dead. Don't worry about them. Wow. Guess which one was the bully? Yeah. And the other one happened to be a victim of bullying when we went back. And that's part of the reason they came in to see me, was one was being a bully and one was being the victim. Not to each other, interestingly. The bully had his brother's back, except for when he was acting like, in his mind, a weenie. But big difference there. And so we can look for some of those clues and just think, oh, well, that person doesn't care about birds. Well, maybe we need to look at some other factors there. And this is going to sound stereotypical too, but once again, I'm not saying that these kids are asking to be victims. But when we see kids that have these characteristics, watch them on the playground and make sure they're not being bullied. When they tend to be more cautious or insecure, withdrawn, or shy, there is higher likelihood of depression and anxiety. There is some increased risk for self-harm or isolation. And oftentimes the kids that become more of the frequent victim of the bully, they don't have connections, either with friends or with an adult mentor in the school. And sometimes establishing that for them, either through a friendship group or through an adult mentor taking interest in that kid, a coach, a band director, whatever it would be, boy, that gives that child so much more comfort that they walk around school so they're not portraying, hey, I'm vulnerable. Maybe if you want to bully me, I'm there. So we want to be aware of those characteristics. A little bit about girl bullying. It's very frequent in middle school. One of the ladies I used to work with is long since retired. She was an author too, and one of my favorite quotes of hers was, "The two worst times in a woman's life is when she was 13 and when her daughter's 13." And middle school girls can be tough, and they can be tough on each other. It's interesting that when we look at the typical girl bully as opposed to the boy bully, oftentimes the girl is one of the popular ones, kind of in the know, and on the outside is very good at interacting with adults. They're conversational, they say the right things, they seek adults out. It's not someone that's going back behind the alley and beating somebody up. Girls usually bully in a group, which once again, we know bullying in a group can get a lot more negative because one person says one thing and then the person adds it up. And not to mention it, if one person's sitting there telling you you're worthless, it's a lot easier to say, well, I don't care what they think. Harder to say that when they're really popular, but still it's possible. But if you've got 3 or 4 people sitting there telling you you're worthless, or your dress looks stupid, or you're never going to get a date or whatever, or no one wants to eat with you because whatever reason, and you've got, the most popular kid, the 3rd popular kid, and the 10th popular kid, and some kid you don't even know saying that to you, well, it's pretty hard to start dismissing that. And no, we're not seeing them getting beaten up, but boy, those comments can be vicious. And it definitely, it can impact grades. It can cause depression, lower self-image, and even some eating disorder situations, especially if the bullying is about appearance. And girls and boys in general can be very mean about girls' appearance, and so we don't want to promote the potential for eating disorders. Cyberbullying. I'm not an expert in cyber. In fact, how many of you know what the word Luddite means? Ever heard the word Luddite? Okay, good. I didn't either. One of my buddies who's a math professor at Creighton texted my wife when I was at a race saying, tell your Luddite husband that he better win the race. And so I'm like, I don't know what a Luddite is. So I went and we looked it up, and finally we found the definition. It's someone that fears new technology. Of course, I don't text, so I'm way, way behind the curve here. I just know to push the right button here. In fact, I even dictated up my PowerPoint so someone else could type it for me. So, so I'm probably not the best person to choose to talk on cyberbullying, but I do want to give you some statistic on it just to be aware of it. I'd probably be a very good victim from cyberbullying because I couldn't defend myself, I don't think. But it's not a joking matter. 42% of teenagers report cyberbullying. 25% report that they've been bullied more than once. 35% of kids report that they were threatened online, 20% more than once. 21% report receiving mean or threatening email from an unsolicited source. Doesn't mean your friend calling you a name or teasing you. 53% report being critical of others online. And I think that probably doesn't include what people say to each other in Xbox 360 Live, because that's kind of warfare that we won't call bullying there. But I'm talking actual direct frontal attacks. And 58% don't tell a parent when these things happen. Once again, we need to kind of know what our kids are doing. Just not saying, oh, they're on the computer, they're doing homework. No. When we think of cyberbullying, it's split into two main factors. One is called a direct attack, which is the obvious one, where someone slanders another person by directly saying, you dirty rat, and sends it, then copies it to other people, and or starts on their Facebook or their MySpace, sort of a slander account towards that person directly. The other one, and probably the more dangerous, is a by proxy attack. Direct attacks can be generated by stealing a password, giving a harassing text or picture, sending website connections, sending malicious code, impersonation of the person, like acting like they're somebody, talking about somebody else. It's a lot what I see in the teenage boyfriend and girlfriend dramas. They get a hold of someone else's phone, and they're acting like there's somebody else that's talking to them, and not pretty. But those are the direct attacks. The indirect attacks would be controlling the victim's account with slander. And there's a new trend of going to hate group chat rooms and saying that someone is pro that situation. So whatever the hate group chat room hates, they give somebody the password or the name of an account that says that this person should be somebody that you should harass because they favor it. Like a simple example would be a Democratic hate group, a bunch of Republicans that hate Democrats, and then sending somebody, obviously they're much more malicious than this, although politics can be pretty vicious, and then sending someone who doesn't believe in that, their identification message to that site and saying, this person doesn't believe in what you guys say. You guys need to try to change this person's thinking. And also, too, when we start doing the cyber bullying by proxy with all of the, let's say, the unpleasant decisions that adults make out in cyber world these days, when we start looking at some of the slander that kids bring upon each other, a lot of it happens to be sexual in nature. And there's a lot of adults out there that prey on those factors. And so it can unwittingly bring adults into the situation. And so it's probably one of the more scarier parts. And I've seen situations where the scary part of it is not the adult that continues the slander, but adults that go in and see somebody being slandered and then become that person's protector and contact them and say they understand and they'll help take care of them. They just need to contact them, and maybe they could meet sometime for a talk. And scary stuff. And the kid thinks, wow, everybody else, you see how vulnerable that kid might be. Everybody, even my friends, are all dissing me. This person's standing up for me. Boy, they're doing something I can't do. Talk about a coercive situation, an indirect effect of bullying. So these things are serious, and it doesn't, it's not like when we were kids and somebody said that so-and-so had a crush on so-and-so. Well, yeah, you cried a little bit and you kind of, were mad at your friend for making fun of you. I don't know. But, it didn't go to where it could go today. And so we need to take it more serious. If somebody said, oh, so-and-so got a bad haircut, the only people that knew you had a bad haircut were the ones that saw you with your hat off for the next 2 weeks. And those were just your small circle of friends. Now it could be a picture taken quickly and spread about the internet within seconds. I know how quick things like that can spread. We have 2 dogs at home, and our standard poodle decided that I think he'd been seeing too much Food Channel, because he went into the kitchen and grabbed a box of baking soda and took it down to the basement and shook it all over. And so we came home to that, and we thought, well, okay, that's not too bad. Baking soda's great. Vacuum it up. The dog room won't smell as much like dogs. We can make this work. Then my wife went upstairs, and he had actually turned on our stove. And we don't have children, so there's no one else in the house. He had turned on a gas stove. Luckily, he turned it on far enough that the igniter switch was going. And luckily, we didn't have anything on our stove at the time, including newspapers or things like that we might accidentally stored on top of our stove. Luckily, we cook a lot. But so my wife put this on her Facebook account, or one of the accounts, and within minutes, there was everybody friends from everywhere had this sort of picture of all these things we should do with our dogs. And this was kind of a funny, silly story, but imagine how much of a contagion that was. I mean, people get real excited about animals and kids, and so I think technology is wonderful, even though I don't embrace it. But I think we do need to be careful of what it can do when we look at the bullying impact. Yeah, he has been bullied. He was actually a rescue dog, so he was bullied. So I think we need to take him to the firefighters and have him do something along the fire starting behavior interventions. Yeah, actually, we tried to put him in kennels, and he broke through. He's only a 64-pound poodle, but he's broken through 4 kennels, metal ones, bends them, and gets out of them. Even those hard shell airline crates. It looked like a mortar shell hit the side of it when he was in there for a day. Literally, blood was dripping down because he broke out, yeah. So we're trying Plan B. Warning signs of bullying. If we're a parent and we're seeing these signs in our kids and we're ignoring them, we're not being a good parent. And not just ignoring them by saying, hey, are you all right? Kids are afraid to narc on a bully. The bully said, hey, you tell your parents, I will walk home the other way and beat you up, and I'll make you hurt more. Your parents can't protect you. They work. I don't work right now. I'm off when they're at work. So, you have to come outside of the house. So ask these questions more than just a passing. If you see damaged or missing clothing or belongings, physical injuries, a long illogical route home, reduced interest in school, change in friends or few friends, school avoidance, somatic or physical complaints, reduced appetite and increased quietness around the home at night. When you see somebody that's being bullied, you're going to see these warning signs. And if you see them early enough, you can prevent some pretty big problems. On the other side, if you see the bully coming home with all these nice new technical gear and sweatshirts that don't belong to him or hats that don't look like they belong to him, their friends didn't give it to him. Not very likely. So ask questions. Don't just assume. It's okay to get involved in these things. If you don't, you might regret it. We do need to try to do bullies help own their actions. And there's a lot of great programs out around the country that are really trying to help kids not develop into bullies. And when they are bullies, helping them redirect their behavior to more pro-social situations. We need to ask the bullies, well, what did you do? Not why did you do it? But a bully that bullies, as I alluded to earlier, their reference is going to be either they deserved it, I did them a favor, what does it matter anyways? There's not going to be ownership. So you don't ask the value-laden questions. You want to stick to the behavior questions. What did you do? Well, I pushed him down in the mud. Okay. You pushed him down in the mud. What'd you do next? Well, I grabbed his backpack and threw it in the creek. Okay. See there's no, well, when I pushed him down, he started crying. And no. What did you do? We're going to go for that ownership. What was wrong about this? Who did you hurt? What was your goal? What were you trying to accomplish there? Did you do that? Did you get that figured out? And challenge him on it. Well, he deserved it. No, nobody deserves to be thrown down in the mud and have their backpack thrown in the creek. How can your goal be met in a different way without hurting? Trying to get the bully to think more. We need to teach bullies to own their actions, acknowledge the results of their behavior on themselves and on others, develop empathy and guilt, change their actions, form some relationships with trusted adults, and delayed gratification. Most of our bullies are not very good at delayed gratification. They want that immediate. Our kids aren't very good at it, our generation. So we need to work on that across the board. But once again, that's another talk. Response to bullies, ignore, walk away. Hold in the anger. I always teach kids, if you take it to the next level, you better be ready to go to that next level with a bully. Now, if they're being verbal and you take it physically, You better be ready to go to that because they'll go there. If you get physical back, they're going to go physical. And their behavior is going to be, well, then now, they hit me, so I'm going to hit them back. And there's going to be a different reasoning there. Think of a football example since we've got Monday Night Football tonight. If I'm rushing the passer and you're defending me and you're pulling my jersey, I'm frustrated, I'm upset, I'm not getting your quarterback. But if all of a sudden I turn around and I slap you upside the head the next time I come in, who's in trouble? Me. I'm getting a personal foul, and if the league looks at it later and says that it was an intentional blow to the head, I might have a $50,000 fine, and but wait, you were cheating. Oh no, because I took it to the next level, it comes back on me. We've got to be careful of that. I'm not saying we can't teach our kids to defend themselves. We take it to the next level, we got to think about that. And if a kid's calling you names and then all of a sudden you start screaming profanity at him, you're taking it to another level. Practice confidence. Most of the kids that get bullied, they don't walk around school like this. They don't have their shoulders back. They don't have their heads up high. How do they walk around? No. Not only do they not see where they're going, but they're almost advertising, hey, I don't feel very good about myself. I'd be an easy victim. Have the confidence to say no. Teach these kids to have purpose and directions. Talk about it. Find true friends. I like to get kids connected with kids that don't bully, that are on their team, or that are in their band, or that are whatever it is, or that find a faculty mentor at school that can provide that sort of strength. If we're going to change the environment, there's some programs out there. I just put this in here just to gloss over it. I didn't think we'd have time to do it tonight because we're going to come up to some questions here in a second. But we do like to, if we're going to change the environment, we need to think about it in terms of an ABC philosophy. We need to teach autonomy. We need to help people feel like they belong to school, and the school is part of what they feel pride in. And we also need to teach cause and effects of actions. And if you look at the successful bullying prevention programs at your elementary level schools and your middle schools, most of the middle school programs are teaching gratitude. They're teaching kids to be thankful for what they have and them to be thankful for what they do, what they do for others. And it's amazing the amount of bullying reduction that we see when people have to think about what they're thankful for. They do this real simple exercise where they have kids write down 5 things that they're thankful for about their school. And then they have them pick one person that they're thankful for that does things for them. And they have them write a paragraph to that person, whether it's grandpa, coach, it can even be a professional athlete, whatever. And then if possible, they set up a meeting with that person. And the kid tells the person why they're grateful for what that person has done for them. Then they do one last thing. They have the kids keep a gratitude log, which is a log of what they do for other people. Holding open a door, giving a kid a homework assignment because they were sick, helping a kid out in the lunch line when they dropped a quarter, reaching down and picking it up for them, reminding a student where they were because they got lost in class. Doing this, and it's amazing then that they give rewards for however many gratitude points you came up with. And all of a sudden, these kids that are so focused on something else, all of a sudden they want these gratitude points. And a lot of schools do certain things like that, but when it's made specific more of gratitude, and it seems to do a lot better in the junior highs. The elementary schools, we kind of just teach skills, thank you, please, that sort of stuff. We see a bigger effect in the junior highs. If we're going to change aggressive behavior, once again, these are the other factors, and you've got them in your handouts, so I'm not going to dwell on them, but these are all factors that have been shown to be components of successful bullying prevention programs. Once again, same things, involving the parents, support from bystanders, have consequences for your bullying, be consistent with it. Back to like looking at the flu situation, yes, we're doing a lot to take care of the flu here in the US, but if you look at like staph infections and things like that in other countries, like Sweden and other more aggressive countries to control this, they have very aggressive protocols to control this because they made it a priority, and it's under very good control. And so I think bullying is one of those things that we really do need to educate people about it. We need to look for the signs. And we need to help our kids know what to do so that they don't become bullies or don't become victims. In order to do that, we need to teach nonviolence, and we need to teach kids not to put themselves in that victim role. We need to teach and model healthy assertiveness. Most all the kids that I see that are bullies or that are victims, they have such a distorted sense of assertiveness. They don't know how to stand up for themselves appropriately. Their body language isn't one of appropriate assertiveness. The bully, it's overbearing assertiveness by control. The victim, it's I don't want to upset anybody. I don't want anybody not to like me. I don't want to get beat up. It's apologetic, not even on the length of assertiveness. So we need to teach these assertiveness skills. We need to get to know our friends or the parents of our kids' friends. And we can't excuse negative behavior. Whether it's our kid is the victim or our kid is the actor, is the person, the perpetrator in the situation. Negative behavior is negative behavior. Somebody calls you a name and you beat them up and you hurt them. Well, that's taken it to another level, and that's a negative behavior. It can't be, well, they shouldn't have been calling you those names. We just don't want, I don't think as parents we want our kid to be the bully or we want them to be the victim either. The victim's parents think, it'll be better if my kid was the bully, and the bully parents think, well, it'll be better if my kid was the victim in a way. And let me tell you, neither one's a picnic. You don't want to have to worry about something happening to your kid or worry about your kid doing something to another kid. Bringing it back to dogs, you don't want to go to the dog park with your dog that all the other dogs want to beat up on, but you also don't go to the dog park because you're the dog that beats up on all the other dogs because no one else wants you there. It's pretty simple. So we wanted to address both ends of this continuum. This is a website that a faculty member down at University of Nebraska at Lincoln has a pilot program there where they work with junior high classrooms and they create videos about how to deal with bullying, actually creating vignettes in their own classroom. And it's a rather clever product that they have down there that some schools are using. We've got about 10 minutes, slightly less than 10 minutes, because these webinars are pretty tightly tied to time, to do some questions. And I did my job. I covered it. I didn't leave a whole 15 minutes, so don't leave me standing for the whole 8 minutes or so that's left, or 7, because we have to say goodbye to our webinar people at 1 till 7. So what questions do you guys have? Yes?
It's kind of a specific question. And it's funny because our son is only 4.5. But he has autism, and I guess my question is, you were talking about teaching them to be assertive. I have a daughter who's 2.5, and she's on the complete opposite end of him. She's the bully. And I see my son at school, and he's that withdrawn, cautious, and we get reports from the teacher that he's so cautious, he's just so quiet. He's going to be the victim. How do you teach a child with special needs, or a child maybe who is really anxious and just doesn't know how to be assertive, how to stick up for themselves? And he's too afraid to go to the teacher. He's come home to me and told me things that these kids are doing in pre-K. How do you tell them, how do you teach them that it's okay to go to the teacher, it's okay, you need to stick up for yourself?
Okay, it's an excellent question. The question was, how do we teach assertiveness skills? And I think I can generalize it a little more than keep it specific, since I don't give specific feedback in talks, because I don't work with each individual child. So I'm kind of like a doctor doesn't want to prescribe antibiotics by hearing somebody's got a sore throat. They want to look at the culture. But teaching assertiveness skills when there's special needs, or even when there isn't special needs involved, the thing that we always need to do when we're going to change behavior is we need to look at where we're at to start. Too many people look at where they want to get. They think of where they want their ideal outcome to be. And then they set the standard too high because they're trying to figure out, well, how do I get there? Well, you don't know for sure that that's where you're going to be able to get when you start. The only thing you know is really where you're at. Now, you could say, if you've got your car and you have gas in it, but you don't know the gauge doesn't work, you may want to get to St. Louis, but you don't know how much gas you got. So if you say St. Louis or bust and you make it just barely outside of CB, well, it's a different perspective. So what I do is start out with looking where the child is at with their assertiveness. And then I try to pick areas where they've got some ability that they do demonstrate slight assertiveness. And I'll start there to teach them that the risk is when you're teaching assertiveness skills, especially in teenagers. Ooh, if they start to get it, they become obnoxious real quickly. And so we've also got to set our expectations to remember, okay, most of the time when we're trying to change a behavior, the pendulum swings farther than where the target is, and then it kind of hopefully adjusts back. If we think about that with exercise, diet, and anything else we're trying to change in our own lifestyle. So I pick safe situations where it's appropriate to teach assertiveness, and I do something that pretty simple combination of differential reinforcement of other behavior. So what I'm going to do is if I see close approximations of appropriate assertiveness, whether they're verbal, whether they're physical, or whether they're actually an action, I'm going to say, Mike, that was great the way, when Susie came to take your toy, that was really good the way you said, no, mine. That was a good job, and don't say, now, wouldn't you like to do that that way every time? But it's just more catching the comfort level. Oh, you look so cute when I can see your eyes looking up at me. Boy, you used a good voice right there. I could understand your words when you used that voice. You stood up really straight. Just giving little sort of comfort cues there that helps that self-image and helps a person. There's some people, though, that just are not going to be assertive. And whether it's because of developmental challenges or whether it's personality characteristics. So I just kind of try to teach a person to be assertive enough that works for them. There's certain people that just aren't going to be comfortable being overly assertive, just like there are people that would not be comfortable being extremely passive. It's on a continuum. But I just want to find a level where their assertiveness doesn't result in them being victims, and they don't have a lower self-image, and they don't become a higher incidence of risk for depression and anxiety and those factors. So I kind of start where they're at and move from there. Yes?
I have a 3-year-old and she has a 4-year-old. And when they're together, it's he took my toy and he took my toy and she touched me and he hit me. At what point do you just let them, go use your words and tell them to give you your toy back? And like how much should you stay back and try to let them figure it out? Or how much should you step in?
What our grandparents told us was only if there was blood do we step in. No, that doesn't quite fly these days. I think it comes from setting the ground rules up front. I try to set the environment such that there's not as much of that's going to go on. So instead of having, the preferred toys that they're going to go back and forth at, try to pick more neutral toys that they're kind of interacting with. I try to catch them being good before they get bad. Bad, but before they get in this sort of tit for tat back and forth there, I'll kind of catch them being, hey, that was a really good job sharing. Let's, the game of the week this week is sharing, and let's play how do we share? Well, you give, and then you get that back, and we trade toys. There are times when if they're being appropriately assertive, somebody 4-year-old goes to grab 3-year-old's toy, and 3-year-old goes, no, mine. Then I'd say, you're right, Jordan, she didn't say that you could play with that yet. Now, if you wanted to play with it, you can ask to say, can I play with your toy? And it's her toy and she's playing with it right now. So if she says no, then you got to wait or pick another toy. But you're not really, it's not a make or break situation. We're not going to create a bully by the kids learning some of those social boundaries between themselves. It's part of how we learn through play. That's the good thing about when we're a little kid and we're doing just all that individual play, imaginary play, we're not interacting with anybody else, parallel play. But then when we start to get into the ages that you're describing, we start to have interactive play. That's part of how we learn those boundaries, and we're not going to be skilled at it right away. You don't, you learn a little bit through there. I look back to the power and the coercion. If you have obviously a 80-pound 4-year-old who's 7 inches taller than a 30-pound 3-year-old, well, then there's going to be some more boundaries that I'm going to be putting into that situation. But kids need to communicate each other when they're crossing boundaries. But it's just like you go back to that shooting the birds out of the, that should have been intervened way beforehand. The parents, there was a great lesson that was learned there, but they could have avoided that lesson. Probably, at least nobody got their eye shot out or something from like that. So that's kind of where I kind of try to set the stage, go in shorter periods, even more than telling kids what they're doing wrong. I'll come in and redirect it a little bit. Hey, well, let's try this. Let's play this a little bit. And then when they're doing what we're doing right, we gain a ton more influence on our kids by reinforcing what they're doing correctly. We do better at that too as adults. If I was teaching one of you to play golf and I sat there and said, well, you swang too fast, you did this wrong, you did that wrong, you're not going to look at me like, what have I done right? So it wouldn't work very well. I did see the clock went to 7. I promised these guys I would thank everyone that was on the webinar that joined us on that part. And you guys are free to sign off now. And I hope that you found this helpful. So thank you.